Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Tina, the guidance counselor of FH International High School, and thank you for joining our FH trial English class. Today, we invited our English teacher, Mr. Robert Crocco, to teach the grade 12 English class. Firstly, let me briefly introduce Mr. Crocco to you. So, Mr. Crocco is an experienced English teacher with OCT certification. He has taught several high school classes, including ENG4U, 4U, ESL, presentation skills, and mass media since 2015. And he educated at L'Oreal in English literature and film studies. Robert embodies a passion for language arts that is deeply rooted in creative expression, critical analysis, argumentative writing, and oral communication. Okay, now let's welcome Mr. Robert Crocco to start the ENG4U class.
First of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Tina, for the gracious and well-spoken introduction. Thank you to everyone else that has organized and has joined us today and has obviously realized they're going to have to take 4U to get to university. I think it's the most exciting class because you have to be creative, and you have to learn how to argue, and you have to learn how to argue in written form and in oratory form. So that includes, things like debating. But what I'd like to do, perhaps to start, is to show you something that my students created in my last class. Because one of the major curriculum expectations in ENG4U is to create and produce media. And you can create advertisements. We will study modes of persuasion through the media, through advertising products that you buy. So you get to invent a product or represent a product that already exists and create a commercial for it. So let's take a look at what students in the past have been able to create in the media section, which is usually unit 3. And there's usually 4 units, so I'm going to show you a little bit of each unit, but I thought we'd start with media. I hope you can see this. Like in my class, you'll be producing media like this. And I'll teach you how. Maybe you already know. You probably do. All former students
down there she's happy.
I'm not sure if anyone ever studied film or made a movie before, but in ENG4U, you have to produce media and you have to demonstrate a bunch of persuasion techniques And that class, that group got perfect. I mean, it was hard for me not to give them perfect on an assignment like that, where they did so exceedingly well. And they were able to hit all the major curriculum expectations that were embodied within the framework of that advertisement. And that was an advertisement for hats, something called Hattie. So they made it up, and it is slightly tongue-in-cheek, which is to say they're slightly being sarcastic, but it was really well shot, as you could see, all over the city. They really put a large amount of effort into the production. They picked the right music. They worked as a team. They actually hate each other, and they fought, and they wanted to quit, and I actually made them stick together. And I said some of the best movies come from a crew that fought anyways, but they had the highest mark in the class, and it paid off. But media literacy is a set of skills anyone can learn, even if you don't know them. They didn't know them, and look at how that turned out. Just as it is the ability to read and write, I'm going to teach you how to write an essay at the highest level, just as you're going to produce media at the highest level. So these are essential skills in today's world: the ability to access, analyze, and evaluate media, as well as create media. To many people, this information through complex combinations of text, image, and sounds, we need to be able to navigate this complex media environment, especially one that's constantly evolving and changing. We must adapt in order to meet the needs in today's marketplace, or university especially. Make sense of media, because we're bombarded by it every day, as well as express ourselves using a variety of tools and techniques that I'll teach you, such as camera angles, even studying some of the best camera shots in the canon of cinema, just to inspire you. So ultimately, in this class, I'll teach you how to understand media, identify who created it, recognize that media makers try to get us to consume either media or other products that media is selling, recognize what a bias is, a news bias, a spin, misinformation and lies, checking sources. Discover the part of the story that's not being told, and evaluate media messages based on our own experiences and beliefs. And that's unique, especially if we're all international students. We have perhaps different backgrounds, different things to share, so that we can become advocates for change. So as the media changes, we change and we evolve with it, and don't get left behind. So media literacy education, again, is a major overall expectation that occurs in Unit 3, and it's usually the most exciting for my students. As you can see, they had a ball making the movies, and were really quite inspired by everything that they had done. I hope you can still see this now. I wanted to start with Unit 3. It's a good way to hook you in to think, wow, this could be a really cool course, because it is. Like, we really do encompass mass media within that unit, and it's something I'm deeply passionate about. I'm someone who makes movies in my spare time with my friends during the summer. And I spent almost 10 years working in the movie business, and have a profile internet movie database, and have access to resources and a great deal of knowledge, because I have experience actually working in the film industry, on film sets, etc. But back to what we have to do in Unit 1. And that's, sort of reevaluate and discover those types of writing, who we're writing for, what a thesis is going to be groundbreaking for some of you, because this is the first major connection to university level work. Teaching you proper brainstorming techniques. How to write a thesis statement comes from preparation and research. You don't just decide on an argument. You must research both sides and then come to a conclusion based on unbiased research that's substantiated with other research that you have to document. And I'll teach you how to properly document that research, so you can use what other people have said to make your work sound more intellectual. But you have to cite that properly, which I'll teach you how to do, which is called MLA citation. This is university grade work where we have a universal standard for writing in English, and it's called the Modern Language Association. It's all highly technical, but if you use it properly, it'll be a great asset to getting you to that over 90 that many of you will be striving for. And ultimately confused why you didn't achieve it, well, this would be a major reason. Research. And are you using it properly? I do utilize turnitin.com, so that tells me who's not utilizing the research properly. It also verifies who's plagiarizing, who's cheating. Chelsea. We need to make sure that after the essay structure and we're learning how to argue, that we're touching upon persuasion techniques. We'll go to Aristotle and learn about the ethos, the pathos, and the logos. And that's the ethical and the emotional and the logical appeal to our writing. Why do we write? Why do we have to have strong presentation skills and demonstrate those presentation skills? How to use rhetorical devices. You know, the words of Shakespeare, for example. Poetry. Things like metaphor, simile, hyperbole. If you've taken 3U, this will ring a bell. Even in 2D, you should know by now. I've taught Romeo and Juliet in 2D. So hopefully you've had some exposure to rhetorical devices and writing with descriptive language that is figurative, which means beyond the literal. So identifying all those parts of writing, we'll have to do in great detail in Unit 1. And this may seem like a bit of a drag, but it's worth it. It's worth getting the foundations of our writing over with, so that we can get to some writing tasks, maybe some portfolio tasks. We might have a novel study somewhere in here so that we're reading along with the learning so we can apply what we're doing simultaneously. I usually pick juicy novels that I find particularly entertaining, like The Great Gatsby. I'm a huge fan of Shakespeare, for example, Hamlet, Othello. I've been doing Julius Caesar lately. I just thought it was time. If anyone has any favorites, please speak up anytime. Hopefully you can see that this says ENG4U Unit 2. How about those voices of resistance and resilience and overcoming odds and power and corruption? Sometimes we learn about things like Animal Farm, or maybe we've already done that before, but we'll be talking about literary theory. And I mentioned Animal Farm because it illustrates Marxist theory at a very high level. We're going to offer a close reading of various short stories, essays, poetry, lyrics, memoirs, critical essays especially. We're going to practice our reading strategies together closely, examine elements of plot and the use of literary techniques, explore course themes in more detail, compare and contrast different texts as well as research, so we can explore common themes and ideas. We're going to analyze and evaluate texts from various perspectives. Critical discussions. I'm huge on discussions. It's, you know, in a classroom, it's easier. I usually organize my class in a big U, like sort of like the giant U, or my desk in the middle. I often get us to sit on our desk and throw our feet over the side and read Shakespeare, or have a debate or a class discussion that way, so no one can sort of passively engage. They're proactively engaged, sitting on their desk with their feet over, and we're all facing the circle, which is sort of like the stage. So it's a little more challenging on Zoom, but I do like it when we have class discussions. It's important to share ideas and to challenge each other and be provoked to participate. So there is a critical essay attached to this, and it's probably the hardest thing you're going to do in this class. So we sort of prepare for it in Unit 1. I mean, sometimes I've been prone to put this unit first for the simple reason that the critical essay is the hardest. And in some ways, it's best to get it over with right away for reasons that you may not see. But for me, sometimes it's best. And I want to show you the critical essay quickly, just so you guys have an idea of where we're headed. Hopefully you can still see this. I have this nightmare that I'm always on mute, and then at the end of the lesson, everyone's like, "We haven't heard a thing," and you're like, you wake up, and of course it's all just a bad dream. Anyways, but back to the unit with the critical essay that I said is the hardest thing you're going to do. It's the first time that you're going to do university level work, And I really do have to sort of grade it that way. But you will select a short story, or it could be a novel if you really want to. And of course, we're going to practice before this occurs well in advance, so you feel somewhat confident doing this. And you're going to apply one of the critical theories that we have learned in this class. And we're going to take an extensive look at critical theory. And you might be asking yourself, what is critical theory and how do I avoid it? But you really can't. I think I'm sharing too many things at once, so let me get back in there and show you quickly. Because like I said, this is the most important thing in many ways. And I say important because it's the first time you're going to be expected to produce university level work, literary critical theory. And these are the different theories that we will cover. Literary theory, critical theory are synonymous. They refer to the same fields of study. So they both address ways of looking at literature beyond the typical plot, theme, character, setting studies. And that's ENG4U. 3U is foreshadowing and, all the beautiful metaphors and similes and situational irony, dramatic irony. We go beyond this now, and we're thinking much more intellectually, much more academically. And it's beyond the basic way of thinking about literary theory. And these ideas are meant to be different lenses. And it's so important that you remember the word, which is why it's highlighted in black. The lenses that critics use, writers use, to write and talk about art, literature, culture, paintings, especially film. These different lenses allow critics to consider works of art based on a certain amount of assumptions. I'm going to teach you what these assumptions are. Those assumptions come from theories and decide what particular aspects of work are important. So how is it used in this class? Well, in an academic English class such as mine, you will learn about different theories, and you will learn to evaluate these theories in conjunction with texts by viewing them through the lenses that I'll teach you. It's like putting on different glasses, and every time you put on the glasses, you're able to interpret the same story from a different point of view. After we have practiced doing this together, and we start with Disney movies, you'll love that one. For this unit, you will write a critical essay where you will examine one text and you will apply one of the critical theories that you're most confident in. And you will have to analyze a text and support your assertions with evidence and research. And that's the theory. So we have a variety of different theories that you will learn about. I don't want to go over them all today. There's about 8, but I allow you to select one of 4 to write about. In case you wanted to get a head start, most potent in today's society, feminist theory, the constructs of what it means to be a woman in literature has changed dramatically. We've gone from a patriarchal society that has sort of relegated women to the domestic sphere, the mother, caregiver, ultimate sacrificer. Now she's the warrior. If you've seen The Hunger Games, she can hunt, she can save the family, and she's capable of doing things that were traditionally left for men, like killing and winning. So it's interesting. Marxist theory, of course, is that inherent divide that exists between rich and poor. So we delve into Marxist theory for real, and his ideology, the inherent conflict that exists between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. It's fascinating. Of course, we get to Freudian psychoanalytic theory, and this is where things get really dense and challenging. If you're into psychology, you're going to really enjoy this part. Or you're going to just enjoy it anyway. But we take a look at the id, the ego, and the superego, our conscious, pre-conscious states of thought. And it's fascinating. And again, we apply it to literature and everything is reinvented. All of a sudden, Disney has new meaning. All those cartoons that we thought were for children were actually for adults. Archetypal theory. Certain archetypes exist across cultures. The path of the hero is something we share across all cultures. Or it could be something like the good mother, or water, meaning creation. We're going to look at archetypes, old archetypes, traditional archetypes, and newer archetypes. Sometimes archetypes are meant to be challenged. I often do a Titanic case study. If you've seen Titanic, we all know the ship sinks. But what's beautiful is a love story, because we have a rich girl who's somehow saved by the poor boy. What? That doesn't make sense. It's usually the opposite. Cinderella teaches us that it's the poor girl waiting for the rich man on a white horse to come save her. But in Titanic, it's the opposite. So in archetypal theory, we're taking a look at modern archetypes and how they challenge old conventions. Just like feminism is something that evolves. So does archetypal theory. So do all these theories, which is why these are the only theories I allow you to write on. But again, I give you this huge outline. I remind you about all the characteristics of the theories in case you're afraid. I've got the corresponding PowerPoint, suggestions for short stories. On top of that, and I really do pride myself on this one, I make you do an outline, a full out outline, where I conference with you to make sure that you haven't even started your essay before I think it's a good idea. Some of you will find this annoying. Some of you will try to skip this. And some of you will follow my steps and get yourself that incredible mark that other people will be jealous of for doing what I told them not to. But you get to choose, again, your own theory, your own research. It allows you to keep track of notes as you're generating ideas. It's a step-by-step process before I let you fill in. I call this the essay shell, where you have an opportunity to fill in the blanks. It's like a bone structure to something that should become organic and alive. And that it does that with your research. I'm teaching how to write proper introductory paragraphs that you can apply to an exam. I mean, this is university level work where we're leading into our thesis properly. It's supporting our main points, proper body paragraphs. Every sentence is accounted for. So there's no chance for you to ramble. Everything works. So it's point, example from your book. But of course, before we start with the point, when I skip this, you should always have a topic sentence. So I really do teach you high-level sophisticated writing, because I don't want you to just delve right into your work without providing an idea of where you're headed. So this ends up being your first copy. If you fill in the blanks just the way I have outlined, and of course we conference as you go, this actually becomes your first copy, your first draft. And from this, you then type. And then it evolves into something else. And now you have two copies. And one of the major curriculum expectations is teaching you to produce multiple drafts so that you can evolve your writing into something that is a lot better. All published people do this. All writers do this. They all have their work edited. No one submits and hits a home run on the first swing. It's all about practice and preparation and sharpening your own axe. So the best thing is, if you do this the way I've outlined, you're on the best path to producing the highest level work on the hardest assignment. Sorry, I've had a long day. It's been a long week. So forgive me if I stutter, but ultimately that is, I call the outline shell. And that is a shell, again, to the hardest assignment that you could hope to do in 3U. Just to give you an idea of the types of PowerPoints that you'll be engaged in. And of course, like most of this type of stuff is, of course, all of it is posted on the Google Drive. So it allows you to revisit the work later that night. I often assign homework that is, review. I don't want homework being something that you have to learn more of. Your homework should be review and practice, if any. I often think that you often need a break or just simple reading. I often have an ISU, which is an independent study unit, and I'll often just assign that as homework. Keep journals of the chapters and read the chapters. It helps take the load off after a long day. Anyway, so the types of writing that I'm going to teach you about and we're going to practice doing beyond essay writing is descriptive writing. So the fun writing that appeals to the five senses. The five senses, of course, being, I believe they're, what we can see, smell, taste, touch, and hear. And if you know what the sixth sense is, you can see dead people, but only weird kids, 1 in a couple of million, have that ability. And they usually don't have any friends. They can see dead people, sixth sense. Anyways, I'm going to teach you how to argue and persuade through writing and then ultimately through debating. But you must learn how to write first, and then you can oratorially express it. So presentation skills is a strong component of all the units. Being able to generate presentation skills takes practice. We're going to learn about body language and everything associated with narrative writing, where you have to conduct a presentation that starts on one side and ends at the other. Every narrative tells a story, uses action verbs, most commonly written in first person present tense. It gives an intimacy to your story or presentation. Expository writing is informative. Often explains how something is done. It generally explains actions that should be performed. This form of writing is considered how-to. It's fairly basic, not necessarily very academic, but this is compare and contrast. I mean, primarily we'll use this through research. You'll constantly be comparing and contrasting different sources. In this city, you could go Toronto Star and then go Toronto Sun. Always go back and forth to see what the liberals are saying and what the conservatives are saying, and then decide for yourself. You know, read the national paper to see another point of view in this country. Read Maclean's. Like, there's way to make sure that you're being unbiased, and that's what this course is all about. If I think you're being biased in any way, and it often comes across when someone gets angry in a debate, or if we're having a big class discussion, I can always tell who is eager to share what they've been deeply indoctrined with. So I'm going to teach you how to shed all that and rise above and become a lawyer. You put your personal feelings aside. So that you can have cause and effect. You can show how results are concluded. You can use statistics and facts to support your point of view. This is what we call causality. And, you know, we break it down as a cause and effect. So the result, what happened. A cause essay usually discusses reasons, the effect, what happened, specific events and circumstances. Back to our favorite, critical analysis. Again, the one that we will focus the most on in our writing, because it's the one that's most applicable to university and therefore most important. If you can do this really well, then you will ultimately improve your speaking. So students often say to me, how do I improve my vocabulary? I'm like, learn the language of critical theory. Learn how it applies everywhere. Learn how to draw from a resource of knowledge that says, I've studied it, I've applied it, and I'm ready to talk about it. It's also fun to take a look at songs. And, you know, sometimes this happens in media. As I mentioned, that video utilized that song really well. That Havana song, that Cuba song, that vacation song, showing the streets of Toronto, they made it work. We're going to study lyrics. I mean, Shakespeare is sort of, you know, unsung music, really. Just as poetry is, you know, words without music. But lyrics are similar, and they have many forms. It's fun to share songs, print off lyrics, and say why we like it. So I usually do like a show and tell, where everyone gets to play a song they love. They share the music. We take a look at the rhetorical devices that are usually, you know, laced throughout the music. Similes, metaphors, alliterations, etc. I mean, I always wrote poetry growing up. I thought all boys did. I kept a poetry book under my bed. I know Romeo did, but anyways, poetry is important. It's, you know, a part of language arts. Understanding that the Dead Poets Society was once real, that at one point in history, poetry was considered provocative writing. It was considered, you know, dangerous material. So poetry does have its place, and we'll take a look at it. We won't spend too much time on it. Understanding short forms of fiction. I might have you create tableaus, vignettes, certain little dramatic exercises. Obviously, short fiction, short stories, etc. You'll remember that from ENG4U. Novellas, some of you already touched upon novellas. Right now, we're doing a section on critical analysis. You could pick a novella. It's that medium between short story and novel. Some of the best ones, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and psychoanalytic theory, the dualism that exists in every man, both good and evil. Great 18th century Gothic literature. I mean, many examples to draw from to recommend if you're thinking about novellas. Another novella that's popular is Animal Farm. Novels are great. Obviously, novels work at a very high level. I'm a huge fan of 1984. I like dystopian novels, like The Giver. I hope you guys know what dystopia means, but these sort of futuristic societies where everything appears to be perfect, with new rules, laws, regulations on usually our natural instincts. And it's very interesting to see how these societies break down and what types of heroes emerge. And the Hunger Games, again, is a great example because we have feminist theory and we're able to talk about dystopian societies and, you know, a foreseeable future that has alienated the poor from the rich and taken advantage of them, perhaps. And again, it goes right back to Marxist theory. So using modern forms of media, literature, and movies, if we can make all these connections, even to Shakespeare, makes our experience that much more enjoyable. I love talking about movie scripts. I'm someone who writes their own movie scripts in their spare time, or I love creative writing. So taking a look at movie scripts, especially original movie scripts that were not born from novels, they weren't adaptations. There are script writers that write directly for the screen. It's a very visual way of thinking. But everything from TV commercials to radio programs and movies all come from scripts. I mean, that's what Shakespeare was doing, and that's what theater is. It's a script for the stage. So taking a look at theater and movie scripts, we can see the transition between theater and how theater can exist cinematically with various cinematic techniques that enhance the form. I love plays. If we had a chance to do school trips, I heavily favor going to see, you know, a Shakespearean production. It's sometimes long-winded though, and for students that don't like Shakespeare, it can sometimes be a little bit boring. But you can pick other plays that are more than suitable for a learning experience that exist on Yonge Street. It used to be dashing with plays at the Cannon Cinema, or going to, like I said, a live performance of something like Wicked, or, you know, something that would be on Broadway that eventually comes here. Personal essays, like I said, sometimes I get you to keep journals. If I get you to do an independent study unit based on a novel that you're excited to read about, then I usually have you take notes as you're reading, so that you can be a proactive reader who's annotating and making assertions and assumptions and predictions, so that you have opinions that are your own based on your own experiences. So we can explore, you know, parts of your life as you learn about the novel you selected. I think I jumped the gun. Journals and diaries, they're just synonymous. I don't know why we say journals for boys, diaries for girls, makes no sense. Anyways, same idea. They're more than just a therapeutic exercise. It's a way to record your thoughts and impressions as you are creative writing or reading about, especially if you're infusing your entries with emotions and personal experiences. Your experiences will be that much more vivid. So when it comes to preparing for the exam, you'll have an emotional connection to the work you're meant to study and probably already remember it. My friend just wrote a memoir, had it published, was doing quite well on Amazon. That was called Redemptive Trauma. Memoir, he wrote a memoir on growing up with an alcoholic father. Anyways, so I've got a friend that wrote his first memoir. But it's a longer form of a personal essay. And it's like you're publishing your memories, really. It's a type of creative nonfiction that explores a person's life. You can focus on a single period of your entire life. People often write memoirs at the end of their life, when they've had a chance to really reflect upon it. A lot of people hate my friend right now. I told him that was going to happen, but he's fine. But most people write memoirs when they're an elderly person. for that very reason, so that they have wisdom behind what they decide to write about. So it's kind of cool. Letters, maybe an old art form. But if you've ever studied Dracula, it's in the form of letters. He's writing back to his girlfriend in London. And of course, the Count is taking his letters and not sending them. So it's really cool. Bram Stoker's Dracula, again, back to Gothic literature. Back when literature became fun in England, and it was all about monsters and fear of the dark and fear of the dark soul. Like I said, not all literature is boring or about love. But I like literature about love, if you've ever heard about Gatsby. But there's other forms, and maybe you'll want to share some, depending on where you come from. But being creative is key in this class. I love creativity. I love originality. I want you to think independently, especially if you are new to Western ideology or what it means to think without any preconceptions of culture, ethnicity, gender, sexuality. All these things in our society here are quite liberal. So it's an interesting time in history to be such an academic person in a city that's so progressively liberal. You might as well embrace it, even if you are rigidly right and conservative. Be unbiased and really use this opportunity to push the boundary on what you can argue about and get away with it without fearing persecution. Everyone still with me here? Okay, hope you're still with me. So again, back to the types of PowerPoints that I would be posting that we will be discussing in class. How would a regular lesson look? Well, in Unit 1, we would look at some of the things that you should already know from either ESL or ENG4U. So not just types of writing. We're going to look at rhetorical devices, but a next set of rhetorical devices. So we're going to take it further from 3U and advance those theories and add in methods of development. So I'm not going to read them all out for you because there's just too many, but let's go over many of them just quickly. So like learning about the analogies, which are our extended metaphors and similes. Anecdotes, why do we share stories from our past to make a point about our future? What do we learn from this? Anaphora, why do we often write speeches starting our sentences with the same set of words? We're going to look at Winston Churchill's address to the Commonwealth right after they declared war on Nazi Germany. Speaking of Nazi Germany in World War II, we'll take a look at allusions, those moments in writing that refer to famous places, historical moments. Euphemisms. Wow, this is a modern word. It's a weird word. Euphemism. We always have a kindler, gentler machine gun hand, right? So it's the act is still the same. We just say it in a nicer way. Euphemisms. Hyperbole are exaggerations, right? I'm going to explode if I don't pass my test. Verbal irony, and I know you all love this one, right out of Julius Caesar, when Mark Antony makes fun of Brutus. He's not being complimentary. He says, yes, Brutus was ambitious. And Brutus is an honorable man, but he's being sarcastic. He doesn't mean it. He hates and loathes Brutus. So verbal irony, when we say one thing and mean the opposite. I'm sure you use this all the time with your parents. Verbal irony. Simile, right back to 3U. Anything that uses like or as, right? So she works as hard as a bee. All this stuff is pretty basic. Metaphor removes the like or as from the simile. So instead of saying time is like a thief, time is a thief. Understanding the difference. Knowing that we can personify all of our words. Give non-human objects human qualities. Learn about our alliterations when we start sentences with similar consonants. Juxtaposing ideas, concepts, paragraphs, sort of like compare and contrasting. Learning about those words, those phrases that are weird, that everyone that's native seems to inherently know about. We call them colloquial expressions, colloquialism. You know, we go bananas. I had a student say to me, what does it mean to go bananas? Is that a good thing? And I'm like, no, you probably were pretty angry. And she's like, yeah, I was. And I'm like, yeah, then you went bananas. She's like, that makes no sense. Like, you're right. So it's colloquial. We've got tons of them. Like when you say to buzz off to people, or maybe Blue Monday. Everyone feels sad on a Monday, Blue Monday. Descriptive detail goes back to creative writing. Figurative language. This is sort of like irony, where it's an understatement, understanding what generalizations are, comparing and contrasting, understanding cause and effect. Q&A, I know you've heard that one, a question and answer. We'll have many of these, usually at the end of class, or for you to demonstrate what we've learned that day, I might give you a Q&A. Understanding our references to authority. So doing our research, understanding our facts, making sure we use those to support our arguments. It's important to know pop culture too. I try to show a few clips of South Park to introduce you to satire, to making a comment on society. Pop culture needs to be ridiculed. You know, it needs to call into question social norms, or maybe older social norms. You know, tear them down and rebuild them. Back to statistics and concrete proof. Understanding that in this class, you need to prove everything with research so that you can provide examples and illustrate them. You don't just want to profess, you must support, and you must document where you received your research. Understanding parallel structure. Any questions so far? I think there's like one more PowerPoint I want to run through, a couple of other documents to show you. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so we get to mix in a little philosophy too, but what's best about this philosophy is that it's everywhere. Once I show you about the ethos, the pathos, and the logos, and it's the modes of persuasion that we use in our oral presentations, in our writing, in our music, in our creative and forms of expression. So understanding that it's a part of persuasive writing. Our friend Aristotle was a Greek philosopher who coined the phrase that logos is the logical idea to any concept, and the ethos is the credibility, that the speaker or the person who's writing must have some sort of credibility. Why should we believe them? In your case, it'll be because you've done your research. And then the pathos, the emotional appeal, which is why we have, you know, such incredible forms of language arts, like poetry, like music, like drama. So what lures us into movies, what lures us into books, what makes us cry, makes us laugh. It's all behind the author's purpose. It's part of the author's main design. They built it that way so that they'll provoke a reaction in you that is probably similar to the person beside you. Hopefully, and if it's not, we can debate. But the logos, that logical, the ethos, the credible, and the pathos, the emotional, is the core. It's that rhetorical idea that the author speaker could be cartoonist, filmmaker, advertiser, want the reader, listener, viewer to feel, think, and do. Could be to control, to manipulate you. It could be fear from a political person who's ruled the country. You know, so it comes from anyone. It could be from one of your friends. I don't know, but you'll start to recognize that these are forms of control. And if you're using all three, you can be quite manipulative. like music that makes you cry. So the ethos, ethical appeals. How well do we know our author? Right? Do they have some sort of authority? Did they go to school? Do they have education? Do they have experience? Are they knowledgeable, reasonable? Should I trust them? So are they moral? Do they have good character, qualified? Do they have the right references? Are their credentials validated, verified? Are they fair? Could be a doctor, right? This is someone that you would want to make sure is verified, validated. You wouldn't want to head into a surgery with someone pretending to be a surgeon. Teachers, of course, you want teachers. Pathos, emotional appeal. It's the easiest one to remember. If anyone likes Charlie Chaplin, the silent comedian, I often show clips of Charlie Chaplin because he used pathos quite well in movies, silent movies, to make you feel sad. The emotional, motivational appeals, vivid language. I have a dream. Marginalized people, social injustice, how well the author taps into the audience's emotions. It's a good way to hook them. Consider these questions. What is the topic? Why is the writer writing about it? Are they using anecdotes? Is it personal? Is it effective or is it too overwhelming? Did it, repel you or pull you in? Is it overloaded with facts and figures? Here's we find our theater, it appeals to the heart, the emotions, sympathy, our passion, our sentimentality, our use of imagery and figurative language. It plays into our fear. If you're in an emotional state, it can mean you're also easy to control. Understanding what those strings are, they're manipulative. Logos, the easiest one perhaps to remember because it has the word written in it, like logos, logical, but it's the use to support a claim, facts and statistics, obviously. How well the author uses text and evidence to support your claim. What is being argued? What is the author's thesis? Is the thesis supported? Does the support have evidence? And is the evidence provided with analysis? Are these ideas presented logically? If you look at my essay shell, you'll see that my essay shell is based on logic. Because it involves research and facts and trial and error, quoted authorities, cause and effect information, so that you're analyzing. That means providing analysis to the information you receive. You need to document, provide analogies, common sense, shared values, maybe challenged values, set precedents using data along with common sense is something that no longer exists in the current White House. Anyways, more than 100 peer-reviewed studies have been conducted over the past decade, and none of them suggest that this is an effective treatment. You don't need to jump off a bridge to know that this is a bad idea. You've heard people say that. I don't know. Research compiled from analysts. If you're using space exploration, you don't have success without this. Logic, research, analysis, science, math, facts, conclusions. And that's really the name of the game in any subject. That you're going to argue based on the research you've gathered from unbiased places and be able to argue about it, document it, and hopefully find yourself in a successful situation to go to university, either study English literature or perhaps not, but still see the value in being a great writer, great oratory communicator, and understanding that media aims to control us so that we'll spend money, aims to give us false fantasies of what our world should be. So I'm going to teach you how to identify all those constructs and deconstruct them so that you can be media makers and have fun with the movies, cinema, and hopefully don't get carried away with things like Facebook or Instagram. I'll teach you the classier side of making videos. I think at this point, I want to ask for any questions that could exist. I'll show you one more thing. I hope you're still with me. I hope that you can hear me. So before we do tests, I always do formulating tests, things like quizzes, tests that don't count. And I often let my students write them over and over and over so that you can get perfect if you need to before the test actually occurs. But you know, the PowerPoints, you would have opportunities to complete mini quizzes where I put definitions and the words, etc. So it covers the rhetorical devices, persuasion techniques. Take a look at what a thesis might look like, what supporting points are, understanding the audience purpose. Take a look at analyzing a few paragraphs so you can apply some of the learning. Any questions? Anybody there? I think I'll show you one more. I'll show you one more thing if I can get it to play. So I'm just going to play you one more thing, if you don't mind. It's not opening. One second. I think I'm just trying to do too much at once. 1 second, please. Okay, so I want to end the ENG4U tutorial with perhaps one more video. It might spark your interest when we're creating media and our film unit.
I want people to feel like it's okay to make mistakes in front of people and follow what their dreams are. I want people to feel like awesome is possible. There's a lack of creativity in every field because people are afraid. This is a new mentality. We're not gonna teach low self-esteem and hate to our kids. We're going to teach our kids that they can stand up for themselves. We're going to teach our kids to believe in themselves. I don't know what I'm finna lose after this. It don't matter though, because it ain't about me. It's about ideas, bro. I will die for the art, for what I believe in. Listen to the kids, bro.
You gotta love that Star Wars ending. I hope you guys saw that. I'm like, such a cool video. Good way to end it. So again, like that's the type of movies that my students learn how to make. It's like it makes me want to teach that unit right now. Thanks, Tina.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Crocco. And now, okay. So I think that is a wonderful trial class. I hope you guys get more interested in English right now. So if you want to take Mr. Crocco's classes, please feel free to contact us via email. I can put the email address here. Also, our info email address is showing on the screen, which is info@fhhighschool.ca. So also, if you decided to take the courses with us for next semester from December to next March, there are some promotions about our courses too. So don't be shy asking us for more details and join us right now. And thanks again for Mr. Crocco for today's trial classes. I think that's all for now. Hope you guys have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Hope to see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.